Hey everybody, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming out on this horrific rainy day. Glad to see you out here. My name is Andy Harper. I'm the director of the Southern Documentary Project, which is an institute of the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. I'm also a core faculty member on the Environment Studies minor here at the University of Mississippi, and I'm teaching my Southern Environment class this semester. There are a couple of Southern Studies announcements that I'll make real quick while I've got your attention. Actually, just one. Next Thursday, the 20th, in Barnard Observatory, we hope, back in our spot, we hope. Vanessa Charlo, Carrie-Ann Fuqua, and Brooke White will be here to talk about Snapshot Climate Exhibition and Conservation. That'll be in Barnard Observatory next Thursday at noon. All right, but let's get to the reason why we're all here today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you all Heather McTeer Toney. Environmental activist, speaker, author Heather McTeer Toney is the daughter of a civil rights attorney and a public school teacher from Greenville, Mississippi. She earned a bachelor's degree in sociology from Spelman College in Atlanta and her law degree from Tulane. Among her many, just Google it, accomplishments, tried making a short bio, right? Many accomplishments. Heather was elected in 2003 the first African American, first female, youngest mayor in Greenville, Mississippi, where she has served 2 terms. In 2014, President Barack Obama appointed Heather as regional administrator for the EPA's Southeast region. She later served as vice president of community engagement for the Environmental Defense Fund and senior director to the Moms Clean Air Force. Today, Heather McTeer Toney is the executive director of Beyond Petrochemicals, People Over Pollution, and her latest book, this is the promotional part, okay? They're selling these outside right now. Buy the book, right? Buy one for your friends? 100%. Latest book, Before the Streetlights Come On, Black America's Urgent Call for Climate Solutions, argues that those most affected by climate change are best suited to lead the movement for climate justice. Please help me welcome Heather McTeer Toney.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for coming out on this very rainy day. If you ever want to understand and think about what climate is and climate change and climate impact, I say come to Mississippi. You are liable to experience all of them within maybe an hour or so, but also, and I think more importantly, understand how people deal with it, which is why this is so exciting for me today. I absolutely love talking about climate, environmental justice, and environmental impacts, but especially at home, because while I travel all over the world to deal with these and talk about these issues, there is something about being at home. How many of you all in here are from Mississippi? I love that for us. We're going to have such a good time in here. How many in here are just from the South? Maybe not from Mississippi, but you're from the South. Wonderful. Okay, so you too are a part of this collective family about what we're going to talk about. And then everybody else, welcome to home. This is the space that really, my dad used to call it God's country, because whatever happens here, how people are treated here, how we see each other here, is really reflective of compassion, sometimes good, sometimes not so good, but understanding this space, you understand a lot about the world. But our connection to environment is really interesting because as we think about that, it's a part of our personal identity in the South. We appreciate and respect the environment like we do our football teams, whether you are SEC or SWAC. I remember growing up that I identified issues around climate and environment not by somebody telling me this is summer, spring, winter, fall, but I knew it was fall because that's when Jackson State and Alcorn always played. That's when everybody at home was either going to the Mississippi State Ole Miss game. It is the same time that the cotton came up. It was the same time that people got ready for deer season. It was the same time that folks may or may not be in school on a particular day because deer season has started. If you know what I'm saying, amen. Okay, come on, call and response, people. We are at home. I thought we established that already. But also, we knew and I understood it was springtime because that's when, from Greenville, looking over the levee, you could see the casino boats were up or down based upon the height of the river. So if the river was low, you didn't see the top of the casino. If the river was high, which usually meant it was springtime and there had been floods, you could see the whole top of the casino. And that's how we knew what and how the environment shifted and changed and how it moved. So I always bulk back when people talk about Southerners not understanding climate change and what it's doing to us. Because if anybody knows what it is and how it is, it's us. We live in it, we move in it, we breathe it. It's part of our identity. Some of that identity is not the best. Some of that identity we have to recognize is also steeped in issues of environmental protection. It is steeped in a legacy of labor, of slavery, of poverty. And for Southerners, you cannot take those two apart. You can't talk about the fertility of the land without talking about the people who worked it. You can't talk about what was produced and what came out of this environment and this space without recognizing the blood of those who are in the soil and the very tragic pieces of our history that went along with making us who we are. And this is a dynamic that we've had to grapple with for years, because the Mississippi and the southern beauty of the environment that I know is both the love and toil of the Mississippi Delta, where we have seen some of the most fertile and beautiful land produce and go worldwide, everything from cotton to soybeans to corn, to also recognizing the history of the enslavement in that particular area. We think about our beaches that are absolutely beautiful, and the fact that Mississippi and the entire Southeast, you could go and you could be on really nice beaches in some spaces, go from there to the hills of Mississippi, understand the woodland, the timber that comes from this environment, and just the conservation nature of Southerners. We love to hunt and fish like I talked about, but we also like to just hang out outside. We are people who are connected deeply to all of this environment and to this aspect. We also have to think about the industries that are connected. And what is this landscape? What is this landscape of how we're impacted by the environment? And what exactly is the legacy of environmentalism in the South? Industries have a huge impact on what happens, not only in our workforces, but how our landscape changes geographically. You think about cotton, and this is not one of the best pictures, but hang with me for a second. While we know this is a product that goes worldwide and Mississippi is known for, when people stereotypically create images of Mississippi, they are thinking of cotton production, but also of the sharecropping. And I don't know if you can tell by this picture, that was both of people who were white and black, because these are white sharecroppers. These are black sharecroppers. We have a shared history in this space of working the land. And we acknowledge that and we see that. It's like I like to say, there's certain aspects about environmental racism and racism in the South that other people just don't quite get, because we've always had to have this close relationship of being in the same space. You can go to the north and go to a white Walmart and to a black Walmart. In the South, we have one Walmart and everybody is in there together. So this idea of how we operate and work in close proximity to each other also connects itself to the environment. But there were spaces where I would see this and didn't realize that there were environmental issues that were also connected to us that had to do with our industry. As a kid going up and down Highway 61 in the Mississippi Delta, I remember there would be these signs of what looked like an airplane on the ground and the asphalt. Anybody else remember that, or am I just aging myself? So you could be riding down the road, and as you're on the road, 2-lane highway, you see a picture of an airplane. Why in the world was there a picture of an airplane on asphalt? It was because of the crop dusters. And it was a way for you to know that that particular area had crop dusters that would fly overhead. So these crop dusters, let's get you guys to crop dusters. This is a crop duster. And when a crop duster is flying over fields, they're spraying pesticides. And those pesticides are not only meant to protect the crops from any bugs or anything that might be coming to them, but it also sometimes gets into the land, water, but also people. And that's what I remembered. I remembered people standing out in those fields with flags that they were holding up to let the crop dusters know what row they were on. It never dawned on me that we were spraying people with pesticides. And it wasn't until I went back to look at this and I realized, wow, we really did have flagmen who were being sprayed with pesticides on a regular basis. Or maybe this was just something that I remembered from a small child until I realized that there were actually pictures of this modern day happening. And that's what sat with me. Because when we think about environmental injustices that happen and how we as people, particularly in the Southeast, have dealt with some of these things, this becomes very normalized to us. But in reality, we have whole communities that have been inundated with toxic chemicals, because one of the ways that we move forward in making sure that our crops are protected is to use pesticides. And this is the type of thing that sort of begs the question, what is our relationship? What have we experienced as Southerners, regardless of our race? What have we experienced that tend to overburden our communities with pollution? And then how do we find a way that we work around that? Did you know that one of the most commonly known airlines started in the Mississippi Delta? I'll let you guess which one. Delta Airlines. There we go. Delta Airlines started as a crop dusting. Delta Airlines started as an entity that ran crop dusters throughout the Mississippi Delta. And they moved from crop dusting, this is Duff Dale and Dusters, 1928, and they moved from crop dusting into actual passenger planes. But Delta Airlines, which is a worldwide organization, and when you go online and I encourage you to always check your sources, go online to Delta Airlines website where you will find in their history and archives this photo. The name of that came from us. It's amazing. The global impact of Mississippi and the environment itself on entities that we don't even know about. But there's some other ones that are still ongoing that we have to think through and that I think are a little bit more challenging and a little bit more difficult for us. Right now, in Mississippi's landscape of environmental issues, there are three major ones I think that have to be acknowledged when you consider what is the environment in this space. Agriculture is one. Oil and gas extraction is another one. And then there is timber, because Mississippi has a lot of land and space where we go and we take timber from our country and it is put into different shapes, forms, and fashions in different spaces. There's one that's pretty major right now. This is in Gloucester, Mississippi. This is a wood pellet plant. And this particular wood pellet plant is an important part, I think, of the conversation right now because it is exploiting the forests, it is displacing communities, and this is an entity out of the UK that for many are highlighting that it's environmental racism. The company right now is located in Gloucester, Mississippi, which is a predominantly African American community. And this community has been going through extraordinary overburden of pollution for the production of wood pellets that are used for energy in the UK, not the United States. So it's sort of like colonialism all over again. You have a European company that has found a place in Mississippi that is poor, that is impoverished, that does not have a lot of people that they think will push back and fight back. And they have placed this huge plant in the middle of this community, and all of the product is going back to Europe. And all of that product that's going back to Europe is going back to Europe in a way that they're saying is clean energy. Is it really clean energy if you are polluting and burdening communities in Mississippi? This is the kind of question and thing that we have to grapple with when we're thinking about what are environmental impacts that are happening in our state right now. And this is one of those issues that you have communities and organizers who are fighting on a regular basis. This was from The Guardian, and this has been going on, believe it or not, for, as you can tell from that plant, it was not built overnight. So this is what's been going on for years. You all remember the BP oil spill that happened? How many people remember that? And the impact to our Mississippi Gulf coastline, which again is a beautiful, amazing area. But the oyster and fishermen and the tourism industry was impacted in a way that completely decimated the economy that impacts what we do in Mississippi. And so things like the BP oil spill, when you have wood pellet manufacturers, how many people, some of you all in here may or may not remember when catfish farms in the Mississippi Delta were the biggest thing. You could ride down the road and you would see these massive ponds. What happened to the ponds? Where did they go? Overnight. They seem to have dried up. But what we did see as they dried up was all of a sudden everybody was eating tilapia. You didn't have Mississippi pond-raised catfish. We all were going to the restaurant because you could get lemon pepper tilapia, you could get sauteed tilapia, you could get pan-fried tilapia. Tilapia was the big thing. It was Vietnamese sway. It was the import of a food that they figured out how to produce in mass in another space and import here that decimated the farming industry in Mississippi. So what do we do with these spaces? What do we do with this land? What do we do with this agriculture that has been key to not only how the South has dealt with environmental issues, but how we've made our livelihood? I submit to you, there's a lot of good news in this. And this is what makes me excited about this issue. Even though we've had and experienced these ups and downs in the environment, we're working on pollution issues now, we have a couple of things that I think are really major that we think through. One of them is the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River, as you know, is the major lifeline. It is the biggest artery throughout the United States of America. It supports agriculture, shipping, energy. Everything has to come through that river. So your gas that you get, the clothes that you have on your back, everything comes down that river. It is a critical source of not only our environmental standing, but our entire economy. So let me paint a picture for you. What happens when the water is too low for a boat to move down the river? Things get stuck. If the barges cannot come down river, that means that the products that they will be putting on the river from other states, let's say potatoes in Idaho, that would get and come to the river, they can't get them onto a barge. If they can't get them onto a barge, what happens to them? They stay in a storage. If they have to stay in the storage, potatoes don't stop growing. They just keep putting in the storage over and over and over again. So then we end up with things in a field, and they're rotting. All because we can't get things down the river. So when people say, okay, well, really climate is not a big issue in Mississippi, actually it is. Because if we're not able to manage the artery flow throughout the entire state of Mississippi and that entire river system, which empties out into the Gulf, then that means that the rest of the country is not able to have a reliable source of industry for the things that they're moving throughout the country. All of these things put us in a really interesting and a good position to not only be a state that moves and makes this determination of how we do things like protect global food security, how we do things like protect our entire energy, but really now begin to shift our way into what is the next iteration of climate justice and the economy in the United States. It brings us to that conversation about what are our solutions and what are these stories and things that we need to know as Southerners that make it so important to us. And that's the call to action. Because each of you sitting in here, you are a part of this story. Some of you probably expected to come in here and figure out, okay, well, how and what are we going to do in Mississippi about climate change? What is going on? Why are our government officials not on the cutting edge of what we're supposed to be doing? I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, Mississippi is so behind. The South really doesn't get it. We're not in it. They don't get how important it is. People don't care. When in actuality, we are the people who probably have more history and more iterations of how to make this work than most others. If you've been riding up and down the highways between here and Memphis, you've seen solar farms that are now starting to pop up in spaces. Guess what? We have land. And you know what's exciting about that? A lot of different kinds of people have land. Black farmers have land. White farmers have land. Land that came from those catfish farms that are no longer being used are now in a position to power the country in solar and renewable energy. It's already been done. There's a solar farm that's in the Mississippi Delta right now that is powering, and all of the solar that's coming from that particular farm is going to power Nashville. So how now we need to be able to utilize these things in a way that they help and impact people in our community. I don't know about you, but I don't like paying high energy prices. I know most people don't really and can't really afford to pay a high energy price. So there are all of these pathways that really do sit with us. And that's the takeaway from this. When we talk about climate and our environmental legacy, we are talking about far more than the hunting lands and the beaches in Mississippi. Because while these are very powerful elements, we also have the benefit of figuring out how we have used these elements in the past, what they have spoken to us in our history, and how we are best positioned to help the rest of the world move forward on what they should do. I work specifically in the area of dealing with petrochemicals. If you don't know what a petrochemical is, it's really easy. Chemicals are made out of oil and gas. It's the stuff that makes up plastic. So every piece of plastic that you have comes and is made out of a petrochemical. Our push is really simple. You don't need more petrochemicals. And the danger and harm that petrochemicals have particularly done to communities of color is still exponentially being studied. Black people have more chemicals in their hair care products, in their facial products, than anybody else on this planet. We should be asking ourselves, why in the world is formaldehyde something that's necessary in a chemical hair straightening product when it's actually not? And the FDA has said that it's not. These are the types of issues that we deal with in the area of petrochemicals. But these are also things that impact us as Southerners from an economic standpoint. If you've been or looked at that space, this woman right here in that story that she's telling, she's not just dealing with the fact that that's in their backyard, and I don't think any of us in here would want to see a facility like that in our backyard, no matter how many jobs they tell you it's bringing. And the truth of whether or not they're bringing those jobs is something that's debatable. But that person also has to go to the store and buy special soap for her baby because the air in the area makes them itch. That person cannot trust the water that is coming out of the tap because the water that is coming out of the tap is contaminated by the industry that's there. So they have to spend more money than you and I in this room do just to buy bottled water. I call it an environmental poverty tax because people who are impoverished pay more money just to live and do things every single day that we take for granted. At what point does that end? And at what point do we recognize that there are populations in Mississippi that are experiencing that? And there's something we can do about it. I will start to close with this. I will tell you right now, I come from a household of ministers. So we say you're going to start to close, and we probably do have 2 or 3 of them in us. My great-great-grandmother was a Pentecostal minister, so y'all stick with me for this for a moment. But I think it is important for us to understand and know that we have an opportunity here. We have seen more and more tornadoes and hurricanes come across our space, and they sit stronger and longer. The hurricane and tornado season, this tornado season that we saw this past spring, those storms that were coming across, those red spots, if you watch the Weather Channel, were getting bigger. We would have situations where the water sits on us. And what does that mean? When water sits on you, that means it's just raining continuously. And the ground soaks it up. The ground has nowhere to push it. And so that means we have flooding. When we have flooding, our systems will crumble. And what's the solution for that when your systems crumble and you don't have access to water? Is people truck in bottles of water. I'm guilty of it. Some system goes down. We did this with Jackson. We did this when there are hurricanes and other places. What do? We go to our churches. Nothing wrong with our churches. We go to our churches, our sororities, our fraternities, and we put together, and we're going to send them cases of water because that's what they need. What do they do with those bottles after it's finished? What happens to all of that plastic? How long does it take you to fill up a bathtub using 12-ounce bottles of Dasani? That's the thought process that we have to go through. Are we adding more pollution to communities that are already overburdened with pollution? Because for every single one of those bottles that we send, they have to get rid of. We haven't figured out yet how to send a big jug of water, a big container, so that a mother of 4 is not wasting her time trying to pour all of it into a pot. We haven't figured out how to send gallons of water to people so that breastfeeding mothers, as they're trying to both drink water that their child can eat, can at the same time make sure that their children and their families have water to bathe in, they have water to cook. I want you to do that. If you can, you got bottled water at home, go home. See how long it takes you to put all of that into a pot. Because that's what we are asking people who are overburdened with pollution. That's what we're asking them to do. And we're telling them they should be happy about it because somebody sent it to them. What we have to recognize is we are them. We are them. Many of our communities in Mississippi and across the Southeast are those communities. Yes, we want to be altruistic and understand how to help in times of need, but we also need to be altruistic and understand where can we put pressure on corporations to stop in the first place. How can we collectively come together to assure that our communities don't have an entity coming in and providing more pollution on that community because they are us and we are here together? What pressure do we need to do and put onto utility companies, public service commissions, spaces that can help us understand the benefit of renewable energy and how people make money off of it? Because there are places in this country where you can put solar panels on your house and you get a check back, not that you pay one, because you're putting money, you're putting energy into the grid and the company is paying you for it. This is the creativity that I think we have in our state of Mississippi and that I'm excited to be a part of. Because if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere in the world. But also if it doesn't happen here, what does that say for the rest of the world, and what does that say for us and how we are thinking about our environmental opportunities and how we are protecting our spaces? Now, this is my second closing. We're going to get to it. I am deeply and have always been, my family has been a family of faith. And I think that that is one of the places that is so ingrained in the Southern culture in a variety of ways. We have been at the bottom. People have assumed us to be at the bottom for so long that if it was not for faith, how would we be where we are? And so coming and accepting that concept also means that we are accepting and embracing a concept that says we care for things. We are not just people who take. Think about that for a moment. In our culture, if somebody passes away and dies, We have a repast where people come, they bring food, they check on you, they try to make sure, do you have what you need? Can I drop some ice off, some fried chicken, some dressing? They are coming, stop, and they are taking care of the family. And I love the way that we embrace that in ourselves. Because it's full of love and it's full of care. You think about them, use Asia here. It's like, how your mama doing? Is she all right? How y'all? You need anything? I was sure thinking about you the other day. I said, let me run by here and drop this off if y'all all right. You okay? You let me know if you need something because we right down the street over here. Anything you need. And if I can't get it, Geraldine can get it over here. You just keep us connected because you know Kathy is watching out for you. And you remember Miss Jenkins? Miss Jenkins came by and she was wondering, how is the baby doing? We have a whole conversation about the entire community. And we have brought everybody together in that one moment of care. That's who we are. Other people emulate that. They want that. And that's the same relationship that we have with our environment and where we live. Who among us does not know somebody somewhere that has a garden in their backyard? If you can raise your hand and say you don't know anybody, please let me know because I can connect you to a couple of people who definitely will come by your house when they got some tomatoes. We are connected to our environment in such a way that we care for one another. We want to know what's happening. Oh, such and such has some greens. I'm going to just drop them by the house. We will go by Kroger in a heartbeat and say, that does not make a sense for that little measly little thing of greens they're asking a whole $1.99 for. Just go around the corner. I promise you, Mary Ann got some in her backyard. Just go ask her if you can have some. I had a whole conversation in Kroger this past Thanksgiving because me and a lady were standing there and we were waiting for them to put out some more mustard greens because y'all had bought up all the mustard greens in all of Oxford. Obviously, nobody had any because the weather had shifted and they just came up at a different time. But as we were sitting there waiting, they pulled out some turnip greens and she just looked at me and I looked at her. She said, you know we don't want those. I said, no, ma'am, we do not. Just because of how they look, but that sense of community and sense of, I know that you know that that does not look right because we are from here and we know what that is supposed to be. And the rest of the world is waiting on us to be able to share that knowledge with them. That is core to us understanding the environmental power that we have that runs through us and runs through our soil. Because a lot of these communities are also dealing with the fact that I can't grow a garden in my backyard if the soil is contaminated. What am I supposed to do when you want me to water and grow my own vegetables, but the water that I would get is coming from a well that I can't even drink? Anybody can tell you that you can't water the plants that you're going to eat with contaminated water. You have contaminated food. And so in this era of understanding the connections between pollution and how we live our lives, we need that Southern expertise to help people understand how to thrive in this moment because it's necessary. I've never seen more value in people who have hens at their house than when there's an egg shortage or the egg price goes up. But you know some spaces around here that's okay? Trust and know if you know some people who got a farm or have a hen or two in their backyard, you're going to be all right. It's these kind of conversations that we have to have and I think are super powerful for us. Last closing, I promise y'all. I'm going to say this and I'm going to be through. This generation and where we are at the University of Mississippi is a moment. It's a moment because the technology and the ingenuity of students combined with old school Southern expertise is a cocktail of solutions that the world has yet to see. And it's really beautiful when you think about it because we have this mixture of storytelling that goes alongside our experience, that goes alongside new technology that helps people see both the past and what we want to do and what we can do in the future together in one space. Yesterday I did MSNBC because I was doing one of the reports for the LA fires and the fact that there are toxic chemicals that are coming that they have to clean up because the fires are burning and everybody has toxic chemicals in your house. So what happens with that? And the thing that came out was there were mayors who were having to deal with the fact that they just found out that this stuff was going to be on their property, and they had no clue, number one, but they also had to deal with community. Guess what? Mayors in Mississippi have been dealing with this for a long time. So this is where I get to come in and have a lot of fun. Because we talk about our emergencies and how we talk and communicate with people. You don't do anything in a community without talking to the people first. If you do, you have got a serious issue on your hand, and they will show up at a city council or a city hall meeting or something and let you know about it, good, bad, or indifferent. But having this storytelling piece is so important because that's the next iteration of where we're going. And I think it is no mistake that we're sitting in the School of Journalism right now because storytelling is a powerful element. The stories that I wrote in my book, but also the stories that we tell and the way that both scripted and unscripted works are trying to tell climate stories right now is a huge space. Scripted work, that's your film and media and television. Unscripted is your reality TV show. Have you ever thought about how Hoarders is an example of what environmental pollution is? You may not, but television directors are. And they are thinking and trying to figure out how do we help people understand what are climate and environmental impacts that they can relate to every single day and realize that they are part of the collective action and part of the collective behavioral change and how we deal with pollution and climate and environment. They're waiting on the South. Y'all, they are waiting on us. I'm super excited. In about 2 or 3 weeks, I get to go out to LA and talk to producers and other folks. They have a lot of different programs in California, and Hollywood is really excited about this. And one of the groups that does this is called the Hollywood Climate Summit. That's not where I'm going, but this is one of the events that happens on a regular basis. Think about it. Hollywood has a climate summit where they sit down and talk about how do we tell people about climate change and ensure that they are coming from all of these aspects of the world. How many of you remember the show Queen Sugar? I see a few hands, okay. Did you know that that was a climate and environmental focus? One of the writers and producers is from New Orleans, Louisiana. The core mission that they had there was to be able to tell the story of the land from a climate and conservative perspective. Anybody watching Landman? I am right now. Oil and gas in Texas. What is that relationship? What is going on in those spaces? These are the stories. Bridgerton. Okay, I know, don't be ashamed. That is another one where they have a specific focus from Netflix, and Shonda Rhimes wants to ensure that there are ways that they are giving messaging about what and how we change behavior. In Bridgerton, you will notice, and especially, I forgot the name of the spinoff for that. I should know it. Queen Charlotte, thank you. I appreciate that. Good looking out. Queen Charlotte is vegetarian. And these are intentional things that they put in here to showcase different aspects of climate issues that connect with people. You can name shows, and there is a climate aspect where they are looking for storytelling. And the thing I want to leave you here with today is, where is your story? Where is the South story showing up in this space? What is the story of our legacy? Because we're the ones who are writing it. I'm excited to be a part of it, excited to what we have to do, but it's steeped in understanding our history, our connection to the past, and then how we share that with the rest of the world. I will stop here because I know I'm supposed to stop and leave time for questions, but as you all can tell, I love this topic, and I'm so grateful that we've had an opportunity to come and to talk, and I look forward to questions from you all today. Thank you so much.
I like very much what you said about community in the South and people helping each other. But there's another aspect to Southern history in regard to these things, and that is a laissez-faire attitude that says business and industry can do whatever they a lack of adequate protections for workers, that kind of thing. When I see that wood pellet plant in Gloucester, I think this shouldn't be allowed. And that does involve laws, hard as it would be in the present climate to pass those laws. And, you know, I'm not sure how many people agree with this, but it seems to me that there should not just be laws that involve civil liability for plants that pollute a whole community, but at least in some cases, criminal liability. And I wondered what you thought about that.
That, you know, it's really interesting that you raise that concept, because this particular political climate that we're in right now, they seem to want to criminalize a lot of things. But sometimes not the things that maybe need to be criminalized. But going to that issue about the civil liabilities and recognizing that corporate interests seem to supersede human resident constituent interests has been something we have grappled with for years. I mean, even going back to when they were building the Mississippi levees, the way that in the Mississippi Delta they wanted to assure, and I mean they being the power structure, which was typically white in most places in the years that we're talking about, wanted to assure that the labor force was not impacted at all. And so the labor was connected to the success of the corporation. And in that respect, there was a protection of it. So if you look in the Mississippi Delta during the height of lynchings in the Southeast, you'll notice that that particular area had fewer than anywhere else. And it was very simple. You don't kill off your labor force. We don't see that in the issues today because, A, there's been a lot of the mechanization of some of these industries, but also we have just the devaluing, I think, of communities and life and getting to the truth of what industries really bring. So many times, the first thing that we hear is, oh, it's going to bring jobs. Oh, it's going to come and there's going to be a lot of jobs that come. You are going to be able to get a job, and your kids will be able to get a job that you can have a retirement and pension off of. But we still are at a place where we're trying to find out where the jobs are, because these people are not employed in that plant. And in so many plants across places like Texas and Louisiana, we find the same thing repeated over and over and over again. Go to the parking lot, is what I tell folks. You count the cars that have a local license plate and come back and tell me whether or not we have jobs from this area. Because if I go to the parking lot and all the license plates are from New Mexico, Indiana, Texas, and West Virginia, those are not people who are employed in Tallahatchie County or, you know, in Bolivar County, in the places where these spaces are. And I think that's the information we have to be able to push back to our lawmakers and ask the hard questions. X plant that was brought here in X year was supposed to bring 200 jobs. Where are the 200 jobs, which should also mean that there's an increase in the number of students in a public school system, there's an increase in the property tax revenue, there is an increase in the number of people that attend church on Sunday. There are easy ways to count whether or not job creation has actually been impacted in a community. So if we don't see that, I think we have to push and get to the point of, are we really achieving this goal that they told us they're achieving? I think as we do that, it helps us push back against this narrative that the corporation is more important than the people, when what we're told is that the people is why we're doing the corporation in the first place. I think I'm going to repeat that I think you said, do I have any advice as how we can marry our scientific and humanities?
Yes,
our consumption of the two. I think scientists need to be a bit more focused on some of the implementation and how their work is actually hitting people. You need a connection of those two and an understanding. In my space, I'm going to step away from the microphone for a minute, I'll give you an example of where I see this show up. Scientists have said, in order to meet the goals that we have on climate change on this planet, we have to reduce our consumption of meat. Scientifically, the emissions that meat producers put into the air, what they're saying is correct. From a human perspective, how I go into my family and tell them that we have to stop eating bacon and chicken for the Juneteenth festival is not really something that we figured out how to do. Okay? And even more so, culturally, you have many cultures around this country, around the world, that are already vegetarian. But if we just sit in the United States, there's the pushback of, wait a minute, you mean to tell me, you want to tell me that I need to reduce eating meat so that it helps an environment and a climate that you messed up, and that I don't have the funding to come in here and make sure that I have clean water to eat and clean water to drink, and then price of food is high anyway? I'm sorry. I can go over there and get a pick 4 out of the grocery store. If you don't know what a pick 4 is, it's where you pick 4 meats for $20. Some of you are from the Delta and some of y'all now, but it's okay. I'm going to catch you up on this. You have this push and pull between culture, humanities, and science that are saying, you can't tell me what to do. And science is saying, well, this is for the greater good, when we have not come to the middle of understanding how one impacts the other and being able to receive each other in a space, I think is important. So I always encourage any of my students that are coming and working with us as interns at Beyond Petrochemicals or in any of the spaces that I've been, make sure that you have some social cultural elements to understand how people receive information, how people move, what the issue is as to why people may not be receptive to one thing that's coming in versus another. White folks will tell you for a long time, we've been eating vegetables. We're the ones who brought some of the vegetables with us from the transatlantic slave movement. The women who came from the west coast of Africa and landed in the Carolinas hid rice in their hair. They would braid rice into their hair, hoping that it survived that tragic transition across water, so that they arrived here with seeds that could be planted that connected to their roots at home. That's why rice farming and some varieties of rice farming in the Carolinas is so specific and so important. And these are the stories that connect us to the science. So that's my example, and I think we have to do more of that coming together.
Heather, did you say that you're now having something to do with plastics?
So yes, Beyond Petrochemicals is, petrochemicals are building blocks of plastics. So we try to get it at the root.
Okay, then I have a pretty specific question. We recycle a whole lot, and we can recycle 1s and 2s of plastic, but almost everything seems to be a 5. Where is 5 on the scale? Will we ever be able to recycle 5s?
Oh, you're going to ask me the hard question and ask me to give you the answer. Right now, it is extremely difficult. And so for those, just sort of a bit of background, when you're talking about those different numbers of plastics, if you look at the bottom of a bottle, if you look at the bottom of this, I don't have my glasses on, but it has a number on it that tells you whether it's recyclable or not, and what category it falls in. Those categories help us know what was in the bottle. So something that is a 1 or a 2 may have had a food product in it versus something that is a 5 that had acetane that you get at the nail shop. You cannot cross the two because it does not make a difference what you do. You cannot clean that to the point that it is actually able to have it recycled into something that is fit for human consumption. And that can be the liner on the inside of your chicken nuggets. Believe it or not, all of those containers are lined with plastic. Okay, so when we talk about recycling something for another use, 2 things to remember. 1, plastic never goes away. You cannot recycle plastic out of this planet. We all have nanoplastics inside of us because as much as you break down plastic, you can keep cutting it and cutting it and cutting it and cutting it. It never goes away. So we're trying to solve for 2 things. That 1, plastic never goes away. And then 2, how do you put it into a position that is reusable for something that does not endanger the human body when it comes back into contact with it? Everybody with me so far? So part of what the industry has done is trying to categorize what can be done where. But it creates a larger problem. One, we're still making new plastic, so we're still putting more stuff into the system. And two, we haven't figured out how to sort what we have. There's a third problem I have to throw in here, and oh gosh, I'm gonna get for this one. The reason being, a lot of people are not gonna like this. The third problem is, how do you recreate the plastic? The only way that you can break down plastic to form it into something else, you have to burn it. And when you burn it, it puts chemicals into the air. So we're creating this all over again just to recycle. So as they're trying to figure out this issue of how do you sort stuff to get it into some type of reusable fashion, how do we also protect human life when we do it? It's now called chemical or advanced recycling. When you hear those terms, that's all it is, burning plastic to attempt to create something else. The unfortunate thing is they're doing it in communities of color, more so than anywhere else, which means these communities are inundated with more and more plastic pollution. And there's not a way that anyone has figured out how to sort it out yet.
Is it still worth it to recycle ones and twos?
I say that it's always worth it to be in a practice of recycling. And I would tell you, you are way better than me, because I have my household just put all the plastic stuff in one space and we're gonna go drop it off at the recycling facility. And then you got mixed paper and newspaper and cardboard. We try to do the best we can. But I think we have to get ahead of that space. How do we reduce plastic production and using plastic in the first place? So what are the alternatives? As opposed to going and buying, like I said, all the little small water bottles, are we using recyclable containers so that we're not going to the grocery store and buying big 12 packs of water? Because the other way that we make a difference is economically. If you stop buying it, they stop producing it. And right now, the need for plastics, it's manufactured. It's not real. We don't need all of these plastics. Your dishwasher pellets, do you really need the plastic that's in the dishwasher pellet? Find the alternative that doesn't have any plastic on it. It reduces it out of the system. If you are a mom like me and you're putting snacks in every week, I know it's tough, I know it's hard, but try to not get the containers of a 12-pack of grapes or whatever it is. Buy one big container, figure out what the little things is, and guess what, y'all? Remember how to wash dishes. We can do this. I know. But those, I think, are more important behaviors for us to get into so that we don't buy the plastic in the first place. And that's how we change the system.
So, I've driven through farms in DeSoto County and farms in the Delta, and, you can smell cow manure. Do we really want to tax our farmers? Because, it's very awful driving through there.
When you say tax the farmers?
For cow manure that they produce in the air.
Are we taxing them for that?
We're not. Denmark does that.
Okay, then we're not Denmark. And I think, we do take lessons from other countries and just thinking about what are best practices, because all over this world, there are practices that are good in some spaces that work in the U.S. and some spaces that don't. The thing I try to stay away from, especially if I have to do global work, and I do a lot of global work on issues like plastic, is to get away from this idea that American identity is exclusive. Because I can tell you, I have been to global forums on these issues, and other countries are like, the US, y'all are at the kiddie table, because y'all are still trying to figure out what the science is, and all of the rest of the world. And when I say all of the rest of the world, I've been in rooms with 127 other countries, and the US is y'all are not the big dogs in the room, have a seat. But we have to come away from these messaging of things like, oh, we want to take everybody's hamburgers. No, we don't. And that's not even what the science is saying. we're so creative that there are ways that in the United States, I think we can think through economic systems of protecting farmers and farmlands and the economy, and at the same time being on the leading edge of science and technology. I mean, we are the country that created land-grant institutions, specifically in some places for Black students right after Reconstruction, just so we can come up with agricultural mechanisms. That's why you have all the A&Ms, Florida A&M, agricultural mechanical, specifically there to make sure that we are taking advantage of all of these learning opportunities. If we could do it then, you cannot convince me we're not smart enough to figure out how to do it now. And by the way, all of those are in the South. So I think there's an ingenuity to us here.
All right, so I wanted to return to the previous remark about recycling. Recycle as well. But here in our area, one of the things when I lived in Kansas and worked at K-State is they recycle glass. And it's kind of strange to me, we have craft beer festivals, we have all these restaurants, all these things, and obviously if you use glass versus plastic, you're doing something differently. And I'm not a scientist, but I was told that aluminum and glass are easier and can be used over and over again, much more easier on the environment than plastic.
Yeah.
So if we know a thing and the thing is possible, I don't understand why we're not doing the thing.
Amen, and I agree. Because I think everything that you said is absolutely correct. At the same time, cities everywhere deal with cost. And I think they look at what is the most effective cost, not only for the community itself, but what cost is passed on to the taxpayer. So when they are making those assessments, while yes, it does make sense to utilize glass in ways that we can, utilize materials that are not as harmful to the human body, even in a recycling process. They're also thinking through where is a glass recycler, how far away is it from the city, what is the cost of transportation, the weight of it, how much do we have to pass on to the taxpayer, and how many people are going to get up and raise sand when they get to the city council meeting because their sanitation bill went up by $5 in order to accommodate it. I think these are all like the chain of decision that they think through when they are considering that. But I mean, you make an excellent point. In some parts of the country, you do have these recyclers that are able to take this in and to recreate it and process it and put it back into a local economic system that makes sense. The question here is, does it make sense financially, and how do you just account for that cost? It's an issue and a challenge, but a great one I think you've raised. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.